Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for another mailbag where I answer your questions, hot takes, observations, and ultimately your comments about tennis or anything else. 2025 post-Australian Open mega mailbag. What's better than this? I would argue maybe nothing. I see the numbers. The post-major mega mailbags, I'll have you know, always the most downloaded on podcast platforms. Always. And I get it. There are a lot of topics that fester over the course of a major that may get lost in the shuffle in the day-to-day. And now we have an opportunity to take a 100,000-foot view, 10,000-foot view. I never know how high in the air to go. I just never know. But we get to debrief on all of the interesting things that went down over the course of a major tournament. Always a good time. Overwhelming number of comments this week, which I love. It's a good problem to have. I always feel bad about not getting to so many, but yeah, crazy number, triple digits on the YouTube community tab. I did go to Twitter X. I got your comments there. We'll do a rapid fire segment with some of those replies. I have some Discords. I even have some Apple Podcast reviews. Remember, you can always leave an Apple Podcast review as a means of leaving a mailbag question. All right, let's get into it. Let's get going. And let's do it. First one is from Dumble Deezy. In his quarterfinal press conference, Alcaraz was asked about his reduction in positive emoting and said it was intentional and that he was working to be calmer to save energy. What do you make of that decision? It worried me a bit because he's clearly a naturally emotional player, and in retrospect, you could make a case that stifling his positive emotion led to more negative emotion and obvious frustration. I think he may need to allow himself to get pumped up to play his best and try not to force himself to stay neutral where he seems to play tighter and is emotionally closer to negativity. Yeah, this was a really interesting answer from Alcaraz in the press conference. I wonder if that goes back to Roland Garros 2023 when he had the cramping issue against Novak at the start of the third set, because at that point, I mean, that was embarrassing. And it was like, whoa, that can't happen again. And it was not because of his fitness. Everybody knows it wasn't because of his fitness. It was because of his nerves and his crazy energy that he came into that match with. Too much energy. So I wonder how far back. I wonder if it goes all the way back to that point where Alcaraz decided that he has this philosophy, or Juan Carlos Ferrero and Carlos have this philosophy where you want to stay calmer and best of five. There's definitely some truth to it, right? You don't want to, and I apologize for the stray, you don't want to really be like Denis Shapovalov and live and die with every point, because that is exhausting. That is probably not the best way to go. But I think you got to have some feel. You got to feel, where is the momentum in the match right now? What are the vibes? What is the energy? And Alcaraz loses a second set that I think was pretty shocking given the way Novak was playing it. And then in the third set, you started to see a really confident Djokovic. He seized the momentum, started playing great tennis, started moving great, and Alcaraz started to look bewildered. And you got to try to change that energy when it's so against you. You know, it's just not in your favor at all. And that's where your presentation, how you're carrying yourself, and your ability to fire yourself up, that is your tool to try to recognize, okay, it's slipping away right now. I need to try to turn it. And sometimes you need to almost force yourself to be positive. But I think he was feeling pretty distraught in that third set. Look, the proof is in the pudding on this. The first time Alcaraz got going emotionally and fired himself up, I literally wrote it in my notes, which I have up right now. Add in 3-2. Alcaraz builds with a backhand cross court, hits a forehand inside in winner. I write in my notes, first time Alcaraz fires himself up and the crowd. Did Carlos play way better tennis from this point? 3-2, down a break in the fourth? Yes, he did. He played way, way, way better. So I don't know how he can look at the way he carried himself in his presentation throughout the third set and be like, yeah, that was good. I wouldn't change it. I don't see that. But I also understand that in the press conference after the match, he was giving us a very insightful answer about a long-term philosophy that I think is actually a good philosophy and a correct one. You also need to read situations. And I don't know that he read the situation there in that third set well enough, because that was a point where he really needed to pick himself up, and he wasn't able to for a long time. He played very, very flat, and Djokovic was the opposite. This one is from Discord from ManQ. Based on my eyes and what I've heard from you in the tennis community, I think Sasha Zverev is going through the same mental struggles related to self-worth and validation as Madison Keys was for the majority of her post-US Open final career. What process would you like to see Zverev go through in order to surpass this ever-escalating obstacle of winning a major? Would it be similar to the psychological exercises Keys used to win her maiden Grand Slam? Thanks for your insight, as always. Appreciate the kind words there. In order to improve mentally, this is my only point. In order to improve mentally, you have to want to improve mentally, and you have to take the mental training and the quest to get better mentally. You need to take it as seriously as you do your technical training and your physical training. It's the same. And obviously, we are moving in a direction all across sports, certainly in tennis, where the understanding of that is growing exponentially. But there is still an insecurity, I think, that comes with acknowledging that your head, that your mind is the thing that is getting in your way. And I can't tell from the things that Zverev has said, I can't tell that he has fully submitted himself or acknowledged that he needs to actively work on his mind. And he could be doing it behind the scenes and not giving it away. That's always a possibility. But the point I would make is it's not necessarily, he needs to do exactly what Keys did, because he might be different psychologically than Keys. That might not work for him. But what certainly he needs to look at, in my opinion, and learn from is the idea that he needs to try to look for solutions in the same way he would look for solutions when he was double faulting too much. And he figured out, well, I got to lower my toss significantly in order to improve my timing and, change up the rhythm a little bit on serve and gain confidence in that shot. It's got to be the same mentality with the mental game. Unfortunately, what concerned me, and I've said this, what concerned me is that after the match, he was all up in the technical stuff. All about, Jannik's too good in this way and that way, and I'm not good enough in this way and that way. And to me, that speaks to him not necessarily wanting to take on the mental stuff head on. So that was my take on that whole situation. There's nuance to it, and I'm not saying there's not technical stuff involved. Obviously there is. I just feel very strongly that overall his own individual performances can be better in these situations consistently. And that starts with the mind. This one's from Apple Podcasts. I don't have a name, so sorry for whoever left the review. I can't shout you out. Is Wawrinka underappreciated? Gil, love the podcast. I try to listen every week and love the detail you go into for each subject. My question may have been addressed before, but I have only been listening for a little over a year. Is there a reason why Wawrinka doesn't get mentioned in the same breath as Murray? I understand he didn't achieve world number 1, but is number 9 on the all-time money list and has 3... Well, where is Murray? I wonder where Murray is. And has 3 majors, winning over Djokovic 2 times and Nadal 1 time. Did Federer's success as a fellow Swiss overshadow him and make him an afterthought, or is there something else I'm missing? So you left this comment. This is kind of funny. You left this comment over a week ago. And the funny thing is Stan Wawrinka went on the No Majors podcast with Sam Querrey, Stevie Johnson, John Isner, and those Jack Sock. If I left out one of them, that wouldn't have played out well. I had to name all of them. And they actually asked him about this. And they were like, Stan, are you bothered by the fact that people call it a big four? Like, why aren't you included? And then Stan actually said, no, I would actually get really bothered when people called it a big five. And when people said, well, Stan needs to be in there. Because he understands, and I think Stan's right. I would get bothered. When I said big four and people would say, what about Stan? It would bother me a little bit because there is a true substantial difference between Andy and Stan numerically in what they did. And I tweeted this out in 2022, February of 2022. Most of this would still be exactly the same if I did it now, save for maybe win percentage. But career titles, 46-16 Murray. So, like, that's not close, right? That's not even comparable, 46-16. Year-end top fives. Murray had 8. Stan had 3. That's not close. That's more than double. It's more than double the number of times finishing top 5. A career win percentage. Murray, 76%. Stan, 63%. That's enormous. That's a huge difference. So obviously the reason why Stan, is mentioned with Murray is because they both have 3 majors. And why is that? Because Stan won his 3 major finals. And Murray's record, I don't have it committed to memory. Murray's record was 3-8 in Slam finals. So there's a huge difference in efficiency there. Andy made way more finals than Stan, but Stan won all of his. Andy didn't. What was so special, let me just say this, is Wawrinka underappreciated? Here is what we need to appreciate about him. He played some of the best matches of his life. First of all, the capability was incredibly high, but he was such a gamer, such a big match player, that when his life was on the line, like when all the chips were down and it was the best of the best on the other side of the court and it was a major final, like this is the match. Stan played a 12 out of 10 level, meaning better than his average. If you can play your average level in big matches, that's phenomenal. That means you're doing well. That means you're handling the occasion mentally. That means that you're going to give your chance, you're not going to underachieve in your career because you know how to handle those moments. If you're able to play your regular level in big matches, kudos, you're awesome. Stan is like an alien. Stan didn't play his average level in big matches. Stan played better. That is so rare. That is so different, so admirable, and just so, that's what made it so fun and so incredible what he did. So I think let's celebrate Stan for what he did, which is beat Djokovic twice in major finals, beat Nadal in a major final. Let's celebrate that. But the Murray comparison, for good reason, he's not mentioned in the same light as Andy. It was not the same. The consistency, like best of 3, not even close in terms of success rate. Even best of 5, again, not really the same considering how much more consistently Andy was at the business end of these slams compared to Stan. It's really just the efficiency in major finals that Stan had compared to Andy, where it made it seem like they're the same because they each finished with 3, but they're not. Next one is from member Yannick Murray. Do you think that the Sinner on natural surfaces story is being overblown? I know if you look at results, it obviously doesn't stack up on hard court, but if you look at last year, Monte Carlo semifinal, should have been more if not for the line call. Madrid quarterfinal before a withdrawal with the hip injury. Roland Garros semifinal with 0 prep and close to beating Carlos. On grass, it was Halle title and a quarterfinal loss in 5 to Medi when clearly sick at Wimbledon. If he puts it all together this year, I think he is already ready to win both majors, and even without improvement from last year, barring durability. That's what I said before the year. That's what I said. That the natural surface stuff, like clearly physically, things went downhill for Jannik that time of year. But at the end of the day, Sinner's game is going to translate, across all 3 surfaces. He does not have any oddities in his game. There's no super pronounced strengths, super pronounced weaknesses, or like very kind of specific quirks to his game that would make it so that he would be a surface-dependent player. He is similar to Novak Djokovic in the sense that you're not going to... All right, like, here's an example. When I talk about quirks in a game or super defined strengths and weaknesses, with, let's say, Nadal, you have his forehand. That forehand is better on clay than it is on the other surfaces. Obvious. Anybody can see that. It's just a layup, right? Federer, the backhand. What surface is the backhand the best on? It's the best on grass. Ball doesn't bounce as high, and his slice is filthy. Okay, yeah, you have that particular quirk in Rogers' game that will point to grass proficiency or grass preference. What is that with Jannik Sinner? And we know the hard court results. He's obviously most comfortable on that surface. I think the movement is best on hard court, but he still moves better. He still moves well on the other surfaces. What is it about Jannik's game? I challenge you and I dare you. Explain to me what in his game makes it so that grass is a problem. What in his game makes it so that clay is a problem? I've got nothing for you. I'm not going to say that there's nothing to break down and discuss here. Like there is some stuff that we can look at, but I think you are right about Jannik's clay court season last year. And for those who forget about the Roland Garros situation, spent 2 weeks in bed, didn't pick up a racket. I think it was 10 days, didn't pick up a racket until 9 days out of Roland Garros when he finally started training. That is not a good preparation. And he makes the semifinals and loses to Alcaraz in 5. There's no shame in that. And when I picked Sinner to win Roland Garros, I knew about the hip thing, and I said I think his hip is fine. I didn't know about the illness thing, which was a whole nother challenge. Another Sinner stat on clay. Jannik has won 31 of his last 33 matches on clay against players outside the top 20. One of those losses is to Francisco Cerundolo. So the idea that's thrown out sometimes that like Sinner has taken a lot of bad losses on clay, it's not rooted in fact. He hasn't taken bad losses on clay. The Daniil Altmaier loss is the only one in the last few years. Does his game translate to clay? Yeah, he has the consistency. He has the weight of shot. He has the ability to turn defense to offense. His physicality, that's a hole you can kind of poke. It's not great. It's also clearly not bad because you can't do what Jannik Sinner has done with bad physicality. Might be right now his biggest vulnerability, but it's not bad. Soft skills could be a little better, but they're not bad. So I almost hate that we're talking about this right now because it's post-Australian Open. The clay season is ahead, but not until we go through February and March and the Sunshine Double. So I almost hate that we're covering it this early, but I guess let's get ahead of it, right? I think Sinner is going to have a great career on clay, a great career on grass. Period. Next one is from Joanne. Thanks for your coverage of the AO, Gill. I thought your analysis of the final was superb. Thank you. No real question. Just a bit in awe of Sinner's mental resilience at this point. He will have been living and playing under this doping cloud for 12 months by the time the CAS hearing takes place, apart from a few weeks at the US Open when he thought it was settled. Anyone who thinks this is in some way preferential clearly has no empathy at all. I honestly don't know how he is doing what he is doing. And then, okay, yeah. I won't read the parentheses, just something about how Joanne is ready to take some heat in the comments. She does not care. All right, let's talk about this idea of Sinner. The word that most people use is compartmentalizing. I guess what I really wonder, I'd love to ask Sinner this question. I would love to ask Jannik, how much are you online? Like, are you on the internet? Do you read social media? Because and I'm not trying to discredit Jannik in any way. I'm just saying, if you are not online, like let's say Sinner does not expose himself to all the noise, all the chatter on this godforsaken internet that I am currently chattering on, his life might feel pretty normal, like pretty routine. I don't know if in the day-to-day, the cloud, so to speak, the looming CAS trial, I don't know if day-to-day that would be something that is a presence in his head. I think clearly it's not. And I just find that most of us live so online that it feels like a really, really big deal. And the point I just want to make is if you take yourself offline and you're in Jannik Sinner's shoes and you're not reading this stuff, that might be his key, which some players could probably learn from and benefit from, although I know it's easier said than done. That may be why he's able to do this so well. Just a thought. I'd love to ask Jannik what his habits are with the phone, with the internet. That'd be really great. I'd love to know. Anything else I want to say about this? No, I also think what Sinner has said on the topic has been germane. He feels really comfortable in his innocence, and he feels, I think, probably pretty confident that things will go his way like it has in, previous litigations when it comes to this case. So, yeah, I think many people would have probably been crushed by the distraction and the noise of all that has happened. And credit to Jannik for not being one of those people who and has clearly been able to live his life without shrinking under this saga. So, no doubt about that. Next one is from Boz of the North. How can we accurately gauge the Alcaraz-Sinner rivalry when it seems we only get to see it when Alcaraz is on a hot streak? Sinner seems to make it at least to the semis every single tournament, regardless of his form, but Alcaraz is all or nothing, so inevitably Alcaraz will be on fire when they actually meet, as it will be in the later stages of a tournament. Here's what I really want to say about this. Don't sweat it. Like, it's just the head-to-head is not going to rule the narrative between Alcaraz and Sinner. Finishing season's #1 in the world, that will be meaningful. Even above that, winning majors, that's going to be what is meaningful. Do not sweat the specific details of the head-to-head as if that is going to be the decisive factor in how these guys are viewed. It is not. Okay? Nikolai Davydenko leads the Nadal head-to-head 6-5. Team leads Federer 5-2. Kyrgios leads Djokovic 2-1. And I know that that's not exactly the same. These are not rivalries, and there's weird contexts in terms of age with some of those and all that. But think about Djokovic Nadal. Like, it's 31-29 Djokovic. Think about how this went down. Does anybody go to that as the decisive reason why Novak had a better career than Rafa? No. I mean, nobody smart would use that. It's 24 versus 22. That's what matters here. That's what is going to rule the sort of the war, the career-long war. It's going to be majors. That's what they're fighting for. So the head-to-head, it's not worth doing this kind of mental gymnastics. And if Alcaraz is less consistent at getting to the business end of majors throughout his career, that will benefit Jannik. Ultimately, the benefit that Sinner will see, you might say like, oh, it robbed Jannik of a chance to beat Carlos in the head-to-head. Not really how you should look at it. At the end of the day, Sinner's ability to put himself there more consistently will lead to him winning more trophies, and that is going to be what's important. So that's my answer here. Hi, Gil. I'm a huge fan of 3 years now. Thanks for always brightening up my day, and I hope you're staying safe in the wake of the LA fires. Thanks so much. That's really kind. All good here. Things have settled down, but obviously, the real victims of the fire, which I am not included in that population, they still need our help. So in any way possible. My question is about Monfils. What does it say about his longevity that he now has a rivalry 2+ matches with someone half his age in Zverev? Is it any Is it any consolation to him that although he is 0-20 against Djokovic, he is 2-0 against Djokovic's clone? That's funny. I did talk about this after he beat Fritz on one of my Australian Open shows, but his longevity is incredible. One of my theories here, other than the fact that Monfils clearly works really hard in the gym and puts in the work to take care of his body, that's a given. You need that. I just think also if you enjoy the process, playing matches, training, and you have a healthy kind of balance in your life, and you limit the level of anxiety that you live with on the tour, I just think that goes a long way towards potentially giving you a healthy career and increasing your longevity. It's a little bit abstract, but there's a lot of science around the effects of stress. Stress is a killer. And it seems that Monfils is able to live life on tour with balance and levity and joy. And I think that's a weapon for his longevity. Just a theory. All right, back to Discord from TJ. Hey, Gil, great coverage of AO as always. I've been looking back over Alcaraz's career so far, and it seems to me that despite all the major success he has had in the last year, he hasn't really improved all that much since that majestic first half of 2023. In fact, for my money, his best level ever was Indian Wells 2023, nearly 2 whole years ago. Admittedly, he loves the conditions there, but watching those matches back, the controlled aggression he played with was amazing. He has reached high peaks in individual matches since, but he has not really found the consistency. With another suboptimal performance at this year's AO, is this something Alcaraz fans should be concerned about at all? Is it just a question of him being incredibly talented but still very young? Does he need different coaching? What's your take? My take is mainly that if you are the youngest number one in the history of tennis, your progress is bound to not be a upward linear path from there. It's impossible. He was too good, too fast. So there were always going to be moments like this where Alcaraz, it's going to feel like, hey, he's not improving. Why isn't he improving? Well, because he kind of hit the top really, really quickly. And not that he needs to keep improving. I'm not suggesting that he doesn't need to keep improving, but it's going to be hard for him to have the kind of like linear positive trajectory that you would see from a player like Jannik Sinner, who took a longer time to progress to an elite level. That's the main thing that I think is at play. If I didn't see Alcaraz adapting, tinkering, searching, then we could talk about this as a concern, but that's not the case. I saw Alcaraz make corrections after the early stages of last year over the course of clay court season at Indian Wells, improving his variety, mixing up his pace better. We've seen Alcaraz at the start of this year come out with a new service motion, a different backhand. You may like it, you may not, you may dislike it, but it's a different backhand, a new service motion, a tweak to the technology. This is a guy who is actively striving for improvement constantly, and therefore I have zero concern about his ability to continue pushing the envelope, which he's going to need to do as we continue to move forward. Next one from Henry Loris, last one before we go rapid fire on X. 2 questions about Alcaraz. Sorry, you'll be getting a lot of these. 1, do you think Carlos has a neutral rally problem? It feels like he just can't stand ceding control over a point and therefore is unwilling to accept neutrality. I've noticed this especially on his +1 shots when faced with the neutralizing return. He tries to blast the +1 as if it were attackable, and the result is a shocking amount of +1 errors in his game. I remember you mentioning that being poor from neutral was a main factor in holding Rune and Monfils back in their respective games. So how does Alcaraz overcome this? I don't think it's necessarily the same as Rune and Monfils. The way I would describe their issue is there's a lot of like 50% pace balls and 100% pace balls. 50, 100. And then like 50 just feels too attackable. You're giving your opponent too much time on the ball on the other side of the court. You're not doing enough to prevent your opponent from attacking you. And then 100% is too low percentage. So when you're seeing a lot of 50, a lot of 100, you're thinking, where's the 75? Like, where is your rally ball that is repeatable over and over and over again, where you don't miss it and you're unattackable? So that's where, like, I feel like Holger and Gael haven't always had that on lock. For Alcaraz, you know, I've seen at times, like, I've seen him stay in neutral and, you know, be willing to stay in neutral, but you're right. It's not always there. I think the word is exuberance in his shot selection. And by the way, I don't really see Alcaraz go to the under-aggressive side of that range very often. So it's not like Monfils and Rune, who I feel like almost miss the middle ground, but then they're often on the extremes. That's not Alcaraz. I think Alcaraz is usually, and look, this has been a constant thing throughout his career. This is nothing new. He will pull the trigger off of balls that maybe he shouldn't pull the trigger on. And then sometimes when he does pull the trigger, the risk profile on the shot, whether it be how fast he tried to hit it or how close to the line he tried to hit it, like sometimes the attack is correct. You should attack the ball, but why did you attack it? Why did you basically take on so much risk with the way in which you attack the ball? So, yeah, we've seen those two things throughout Alcaraz's career. There is an exuberance, an over-exuberance oftentimes in his shot selection that he needs to try to tame, that he needs to try to rein in. And look, we talked about at the beginning of the mailbag, it's situational, right? And I think this is situational. What is the score? Like, what does the scoreboard say? How well have you been playing? Have you been making the balls? Meaning, is your timing right? Is your positioning on point? Like, are you controlling your ground strokes well? And if you are, okay, we can push the envelope a little bit more on the aggression. Like in Beijing, In Beijing, he couldn't miss. He was just unbelievable. The forehand in Beijing was a joke. So, okay, if the forehand is going to perform at that level, let's pedal to the metal, baby. Green light. Floor it. But then you need to recognize when you don't have it. Scale back. Try to create some rhythm. Rely on the legs a little bit more. That gear, that plan B, he is still trying to get comfortable going to that. There's no doubt about it. Okay, number 2 here from Henry. Alcaraz has been scrutinized for receiving an excess of on-court coaching, yet his recent losses have been marred by mystifying tactical misses. In your estimation, how has JCF not noticed obvious ideas like the issues in return position present in the recent Djokovic matchups? Alcaraz and JCF seem hyper-aware of the technical issues in his game, serve, time, and consistency, but the lack of tactics is the most alarming to me. I wish that Alcaraz was asked about return position after the match. I wish that Juan Carlos Ferrero had to do a press conference after the match like coaches do in all other sports. If we're going to legalize coaching in tennis, then why don't the coaches have to talk to the media? This is ridiculous. I know I'm the only one clamoring for that maybe, but this is something I feel strongly about. The coaches should have to talk to the press, just like the players. Not before, not when on-court coaching was illegal, but are we doing coaching or not? If we're going to do coaching, let's do coaching, and they should talk to the media. Sorry. I went on a little aside. So, unfortunately, I don't know what the answer is of why Alcaraz got beat on the slice serve out wide on both first and second on the deuce side over and over and over and over again. After that happened at the Olympics, at the previous match, when you had an entire kind of pre-match build-up to look at what happened the last time you played the guy and to try to make an adjustment. That said, Alcaraz had a serve that Djokovic couldn't solve until this time. The kicker out wide on the ad side gave Novak fits over the course of multiple matches. So sometimes it's not easy, and sometimes you face a dilemma technically. But the fact that Alcaraz didn't move back at any point until the very, very end, until it was too late, particularly after he had a little bit of success with it at the end of the first set, and then he moved up again for some reason, which I think is just cloudy head. Look, there's a couple of things to recognize here. First of all, Carlos was in a mental blender. He was in a blender. So you can think pragmatically about the tactics that he was missing. And we're not wrong to do that. But you also have to understand, if you watched Alcaraz here, very clear that he was rattled. Very, very rattled by the circumstance. So the clear thinking wasn't happening. Now, could you look at Juan Carlos Ferrero and be like, hey, this is where on-court coaching can come in handy? Like, this is where the problem-solving aspect of tennis, the composure aspect of tennis, your ability to think clearly in adverse situations, that used to be a really rare skill. This is where on-court coaching can actually give a player a handicap. So why couldn't Juan Carlos Ferrero do that? That is fair. Here's what I would theorize. I would theorize that they didn't feel moving back was the right solution because they didn't want to get dragged further off the court by Djokovic's slice serve out wide. That was probably the logic. Do I think that was correct? I think the result is very clear with how many returns Alcaraz missed. That was not correct. Look, anything is better than missed returns. So if you're going to get dragged further off the court, okay, let's make the return though. And I think that's better. We're talking about the fastest guy, maybe the fastest guy who's ever graced a tennis court, one of. He can recover his position. He can. Maybe not every time. Djokovic is clinical. We get that. But anything is better than all of the missed returns. And if Alcaraz could move back and cheat right, anticipate right, lean right at any point, whether it be when the toss goes up for Novak, or even pre-serve. If you just want to kind of stand in the doubles alley, make Novak beat you T. If Alcaraz wanted to do that and he got the slice serve wide and he was really cheating to it, he probably would have been able to hit a high enough quality return in terms of depth and pace. He would give himself extra time. He wouldn't be moving to it. He wouldn't be rushed by it. He'd probably hit a good enough return to get in the point. So I think a lot was made. Here's where the one thing I really do want to emphasize, a lot was made of the vertical adjustments that Alcaraz didn't make until very, very late. What about the lateral adjustments? I think that's a factor here, that he never got stubborn about, okay, I'm done getting beaten with the wide serve. Done. Beat me T. I'm taking away the wide. Laterally, I'm making that adjustment. Never happened, which was strange to me. Let's go to Twitter. Let's do some rapid-fire Twitter questions. I'm not going to put these up on screen. I'm just going to run right through them, all right? First one from Double Fault. Who is more likely to make Turin, Tommy Paul or Ben Shelton? I could honestly see both of them, but definitely one of them passing Fritz in the rankings if Taylor doesn't have a deep U.S. Open run. Of course, Taylor doesn't have to have a deep U.S. Open run to finish above them. He's not like when we talk about year-end ranking, defending points doesn't have anything to do with it. So it's really just what he does throughout the entire year. But I disagree with. I still think Fritz is going to be the top American, but you pose a very interesting question when it comes to who is more likely, Tommy or Ben. And maybe I'm a little bit biased by the fact that Shelton has gotten off to such a flyer to start the year. I probably would have said Tommy Paul before the season began. I'll be the first to admit it. But at this point, I will say Ben. I mean, because there is a world in which things click for him in a way where he has patched up some of the weaknesses and bolstered some of the strengths. And what we've always said about Ben Shelton, I've said it about Ben from the start. There is a good ceiling there and a ton to work on. Those two things have seemed abundantly clear about Ben Shelton from the very start. So when there's a high ceiling and there's a lot of stuff that can get better, to me that speaks to a potential for things to accelerate in his career in a way where Tommy Paul, man, like I've been saying this, I think he's dynamite physically at this point in time. He's worked so hard. I think he's really good mentally at this point in time. He is so well coached by Brad Stein. I think one of the best in the business. He plays smart. It's hard to see him reinventing the wheel here and becoming like a way better player than he is right now. It's just hard. And that's a credit to Tommy because I think he does things right. Like so many things right. I think he is polished. And look, he's a lot older than Ben. It took Tommy a while to get to that point, but he's at that point. Ben is not. From Dr. James Shea. Is it unfair to give much of the credit of Madison Keys' win to her racket? Much of the credit? Unfair, maybe, but look, it's one of the storylines. But here's the thing, right? We're not crediting Maddie's racket, so to speak. We're crediting Maddie for eliminating the fear or overcoming the fear and the stubbornness that exists when it comes to, changing a frame that you've been using your entire career. You have made a living, a great living with a particular weapon, and you are going to make a drastic technology change. That's scary. Really scary. You got to have an open mind. You got to have a lot of trust, and you got to be willing. And Keys has talked about it. She was just willing to be like, look, I'm done doing the same thing. I used to think that I could eventually it was going to happen for me if I just kept at it. And she completely got rid of that mentality. And she was like, it's not just going to happen if I keep at it. I need to start changing stuff. She started changing stuff. So in that respect, we're not like saying, oh, what a great racket, the Yonex E-Zone. Fantastic racket. Incredible. Send the trophy to the Yonex headquarters, right? Nobody's saying that. But with Keys making a change with her racket and then immediately going on the tear that she just went on, of course we're going to look at the racket. It would have been the same thing if she made a coaching change and went on that kind of tear, or if she changed anything else and went on that kind of tear. You look to what changed, and that change is going to get talked about and credited, and rightly so. But I do think that the majority of the credit goes to the overall shift in mentality that she has undergone, and that is where most of the attention should be, and I think it has. Also changed her serve technique, right? But if she kept the same racket, I don't know. Like you could see an alternate universe where she didn't make the racket change and she didn't talk about the mental stuff. Maybe we'd be talking about the new serve technique, right? But I think it's all of these things. From Captain Markey, who is most likely to win a slam this year besides Sinner, Alcaraz, Zverev, and Djokovic? Well, if you're going to leave out Medvedev, I still have to say Medvedev. I mean, I know things have gone the wrong direction. You might look at you guys know what my prediction was for him before the end of the year. But if you're going to leave Medvedev out of that group, I do think it's Daniil. That said, if we want to add Medvedev to that group, who after that? I would say maybe Holger Rune US Open. If he starts to dial things in, capability might be there. I would say Casper Ruud, Roland Garros. Another guy who I have casted some doubts on, but mind you, I have no doubt about his top, his peak level, his capabilities when he's at his best. I love his game when he's at his best. And on clay, it's proven that he's going to probably put himself in the mix at Roland Garros. So those would probably be the two that I'd throw out there. Ruud, Roland Garros, Rune, US Open. But ultimately, with the names that you gave me, I'd say Medvedev. Next one is from Michael Tennis Boy. Not exactly a question, but you keep saying that Medvedev's preparation was not optimal. But before AO, he said that his preseason was 5 weeks long and one of the best he's had. Thank you for pointing that out. The prevailing sentiment that Medvedev's preparation was not optimal was based on how late he arrived in Melbourne. That's what it was based on. 3 days before first round? Maybe, right? Something like that. Like, that's just, you don't see that very often. And normally you're out there playing some hard practice sets, some hard practice matches. You're adjusting to the time zone nice and early so that your body clock is there. So that's, I guess nobody asked to follow up on that. That's great that Daniil had 5 weeks of good training at home, but the birth of his child, second child with his wife Daria, seemingly delayed his arrival in Melbourne. And that's why I think folks looked at Daniil coming in and thought, okay, I don't know about this. That's where it comes from. But also, I do think we should take what Daniil said seriously and take that into account. So thank you for pointing that out. From Nathaniel, we saw fantastic performances from the next-gen kids, Fonseca, Tien, Mickelson, Mensik. Do you see any one of them potentially challenging in a significant way in the supposed Alcaraz-Sinner era? Well, yeah, I mean, I see Fonseca challenging in a significant way. Tien and Mickelson and Mensik, they could, but I have some questions. Even Mensik, who I drafted number 1 overall like last fall when I did 23 and under draft, and he's been my favorite young guy when there just wasn't enough with Fonseca. Like I hadn't seen him play tour level, so I just wasn't really ready to say certain things about him or go to certain places with him. But even Mensik, like, the forehand concerns me. I don't have that kind of thing with Fonseca. I'm not really concerned about anything. So he's my guy out of that group. From John, just feeling physically soothed. Just feeling totally soothed by the Madison Keys win. What a comeback. Her struggles, though different, are as heavy as Jennifer Capriati's. I love that they both found redemption in Australia. Yeah, I have nothing to add. From N. Van Arcade. If Learner Tien keeps refining his current game style, do you think he would be able to reach the top 10, or would he need to develop a big weapon, example, precise spot serving similar to Nakashima or Djokovic to make that jump? With a good serve, he could be like a 2019 to 2021 Medvedev. Yes, although, and you acknowledge this, Medvedev is 7 inches taller. So it's hard. It would be hard to copy and paste that model. I don't know if the serve necessarily has to be that weapon, but you have to be damaging somewhere in order to be a top 10 player. You just do. You have to be damaging somewhere. It could be his forehand. Now, his forehand, as of now, it's a deadly accurate forehand, especially inside out, where it just feels like he can put it 2 ball lengths away from the sideline on command. So a very precise forehand is a great weapon to have. That might be it. I mean, that was Ferrer's weapon. That's where Ferrer was damaging. People like to say he had no weapons. His forehand was big. He dictated with the forehand. Maybe he didn't turn points around one swing of the racket, hit the ball Mach 8 from 7 feet behind the baseline and come up with winners. Yeah, David didn't do that, but he dictated with the forehand. And Lerner, I think that's the shot that he needs to develop as a bigger and bigger weapon. The serve can get good, but I don't think it can get great like Nakashima and Djokovic necessarily, just given his height. This next one from Abhishek. What did you think of Novak posting his injury scans to show proof of injury? The boos he got in the Zverev match, and I saw your episode with Steve Flink. I think I agree with Steve more that in set 2, Carlos let go of the rope, but after that, Novak's level kept Carlos at bay. Well, I do. I didn't disagree. I guess the only thing that maybe Steve and I differed on was I do think Alcaraz played pretty badly in the third. But I don't think it was Carlos letting go of the rope in the third. I thought it was him, being panicky and kind of bewildered and rattled by what was happening. So it's not as if I thought he kept his foot off the gas for more than the second set. All right, anyway, let me get to your question because it's a good one. Okay, first off, what did I think of Novak posting his injury scans? I'd do the same damn thing. I would do the same thing if I were in Novak's shoes. If people were questioning the injury as to the extent that they were, I would just post the scans. I mean, there's nothing better when people are doubting to just kind of post the proof, come up with the receipts, shut everybody up. So that's exactly what I would do in Novak's position. I will say, he posts this, right? And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, what the heck am I looking at? I don't know how to read an MRI. There was a really good explainer on Instagram. Somebody made a reel who does doctor stuff on Instagram that I shared on my story. Follow me on Instagram at Gill Gross _. I shared it on my story. That was the first time I actually knew how to look at the MRI. I mean, that could have been I didn't even know what angle we were looking at it from. And I even saw some incorrect information on X where somebody was like, this is where the tear is. And then I watched the actual expert and it's like, no, that person was wrong. So it is kind of funny. Everybody being a doctor on the internet thinking that they know what's happening, where I'll be the first to admit Novak posted that, and I'm just like, this is the same as if he like speaks Serbian. Like, I don't know how to interpret this at all. Yeah, but I'd post the scan too. All right, let me hit on the booze thing. I'm glad somebody mentioned this because I have not. Look, I'll be damned if after a Djokovic Alcaraz match that was fascinating, such a memorable match, such a fun match to talk about, such an interesting spectacle, I'll be damned if I'm going to let 500 bozos in Rod Laver Arena who were, who decided to boo Novak as he left the court. And boos are very loud. And I know I said the number 500. I don't know how much. I don't know. Is it 1,000? Was it? I don't know what the number is. Didn't sound like the majority of the crowd. Didn't even sound like a lot of the crowd. It sounded like a portion of it. And boos just have a lot of carry. Why should we let that take up so much oxygen after a match like that? Why should we let those people become the topic of conversation after an enormous Novak Djokovic win, a massively consequential Novak Djokovic win? I'm going to stop and talk about the bozos who booed? I don't want to do that. So I'm glad somebody asked about it here on the mailbag, right? Because this is where I like to kind of get into all these kind of different topics. Whatever is on your guys' mind is what I like to talk about. But it's like everybody's going to come and, yeah, look, obviously booing an injured opponent after retiring, especially after everything that Djokovic has given throughout the years to this tournament and to the fans of Melbourne, is absolute, moron behavior, classless behavior. At the same time, it's fans at a sporting event. I hold them to no standard, very little standard. Especially as a whole. So was I shocked that people who spent a lot of money and were caught off guard by the retirement and were maybe drunk, some people started booing? I was not shocked. I do not think it reflects a great level of maturity or class, but I was not shocked, and I was not about to spend my energy on that. I just think it's like, everybody in the media is going to take turns like denouncing it and dunking on the fans who booed Novak. Isn't that a waste of everybody's time? I think that everybody knows that like it was stupid and classless, but I just didn't think it needed to be covered or paid attention to the extent that it was. That's the only point I want to make. All right. How many more do we have here on X? After the lackluster second week matches on the men's side, where do you stand on the best of 5 versus 3 debate for slams? I do not blame lackluster matches on best of 5. Seattle HQ. How savvy are professional tennis players with their racket equipment? I remember Lendl in the 80s and Bosworth, and now thinking about Madison Keys and how she made the jump to Yonex after many years with Wilson. Most players, I would say, aren't savvy at all. They picked up a racket as a junior, and they are going to stick with it for the remainder of their careers. If you look at most players, that is going to be how this goes. They find something they like, they trust it, they get used to it, it's predictable. They start playing high-stakes tennis matches for millions and millions of dollars with this racket. They are never going to change. That's how it usually goes. Some no. There will be some exceptions. I remember talking to Sam Querrey about this last year. He's an example of a dude, he'd never thought about his racket. He never thought about his strings. He didn't know how heavy his racket was. He wasn't worried about the RA and the swing weight. It's just a lot of players, they don't want to... Look, this is something for rec players too. I think a lot of rec players know this, but also it's fun to be nerdy about gear. So I'm not saying that anybody shouldn't be. It's a fun part of being a recreational tennis player is to like try new rackets and have fun with gear. But it's not good for your game if you're thinking about gear. Like, it's just not. And most of these pros subscribe to the idea that they should be focused on improving their fitness and their match toughness and adding technical stuff to their game. And that should be the main focus. And for the most part, they're right. But I think maybe sometimes it's also worth some experimentation from time to time. No doubt. So you got to find a balance, and it also depends on the individual. From New Day, I don't get the quote, believe your eyes mantra when it comes to hyping young players. For every Alcaraz, there are dozens of players who seem to have everything at a young age, but come up short later. But no one ever owns up to ever overhyping them. Hope Fonseca is an exception. Look, I can only speak for myself. I've only really said one player, like, immediately, generational, different, special, gonna win slams, gonna be number one, and that was Alcaraz since I started YouTube. Fonseca, I'm in the same place. Like, I think he's a sure bet. I think he's gonna be great. I think maybe I got a little excited about Khachanov in 2018, and that was one that I probably, like, if I go back and listen to some of the things I was saying about Karen, I misread him a little bit, particularly as a server. Like, he never really became an elite server, and I thought he was watching him in 2018, and that wasn't really the reality. And then I think I just overlooked some of the forehand issues that he was having way more than I should have, and obviously not much of a transition game either, no hands. So I think Khachanov, I just got a little overexcited there. I don't know that I ever said Karen's going to win slams. I certainly never picked him to win a slam. I have never picked Tsitsipas to win a slam. I've never said that Zverev is going to win a slam. These are things that I've never said. So I'll speak for myself here. The trust your eyes thing, I'm not saying that it can't come back and end up being wrong. Like, obviously it can be wrong, but my point in trust your eyes is if you don't trust your eyes, you're actually never going to be right. Like, you'll be right 0% of the time. If you just wait for the results to show you that a young player is great. Obviously you're never going to be able to be excited or predictive about that player before they become great. Because then if you're going to wait for your results, then you've missed it, And I just don't understand. I don't understand why so many fans are allergic to evaluating a young player and getting excited about that evaluation. And instead, it's almost like it's wrong to get excited about a player until they, like, what? Win a major? We just can't get excited about anybody? So, I don't know. There's levels to it, right? Not that I wasn't excited about a lot of these young guys, but Fonseca's a different level, in my opinion. From Gus, in the past, tennis was divided between Federer's reign on fast surfaces versus Nadal's reign on clay. Today, we see Sinner owning hard court while Alcaraz dominates both clay and grass. Musetti also excels on clay and grass, but struggles on a hard court. What do you think has changed? I don't want to get into the nuances of the natural surfaces and like why. I have theories about why Musetti has preferred the natural surfaces. There are some theories about Alcaraz specifically, but we are not going to see this thing continue throughout Alcaraz and Sinner's careers in their rivalry. It's not going to be as straightforward as it was in 2024, where Alcaraz won the natural surface slams and Sinner won the hard court slams. I don't see that. And if I'm wrong, then we'll reevaluate, if it continues to trend that way. Dimitrov's increased amount of injuries since Wimbledon 2024, plus your thoughts on if he can still win a slam. Yeah, I don't think his body can hold up 2 weeks best of 5, unfortunately. This one's from Tennis in the Park. Roddick said he wanted Ben Shelton to improve his first serve, which seems odd, but gave good rationale. Sinner had higher average miles per hour on his first serve. A more dangerous and accurate first serve would make the spin serves more effective, etc., etc. I wonder, could Goran be persuaded to consult? Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I've been saying that for a while. I totally agree with Andy. Ben's first serve is not carrying enough weight if he wants it to be a strength. I've been saying that for a while. It's not a serve that dominates matches. There is no replacement for hitting big serves tight to the sidelines. And Ben, his level of spot serving and his, sometimes taking speed off the ball, it doesn't do him any favors in terms of winning free points, which is what a great server should be striving to do, win free points. Tommy Paul made the top 10 for the first time. What are results in 2025 that could show he could stay for more than a cup of coffee? Well, he did miss a lot of the clay court season. He got hurt. He injured his ankle in Miami. So, playing a full season could be where he sort of improves a little bit. I always think the forehand is the barometer shot for Paul. And when he can find a way to be effective off of that wing, it just unlocks the rest of his game. He's another guy. Well, okay, you didn't ask that. You asked what are results in 2025. I mean, I think it's another slam run, no? US Open's been a little bit tough for him over the years, especially because he played Sinner really well, forced him to 2 tie breaks, and just didn't win the big points against Jannik. Could have had something special brewing there and played admirably well. So he hasn't really had a U.S. Open run yet that I think he can be really proud of. That's one thing. I think his game is awesome for grass. Look, I think Tommy can hang in there. I just have my doubts about him almost like transcending that tier, but I think he can hang in there. From Vakash, given his age, what is the next evolution Djokovic must bring in his game to offset endurance? Nothing he's not already doing. Yeah, I think everything he's been doing, beefing up the forehand, being more dominating with his serve, recognizing matchups where he needs to come forward all the time. Yeah, some people have talked about a forehand drop shot. He's never really looked at that. I don't know. If you need me to say something, then maybe I'll go to that. But I think Novak is doing everything he needs to do. Second one, how would you compare the 2 greatest returners, Djokovic versus Agassi? Also, who outside of the top 6 on the ATP is consistently elite in return games? De Minaur is outside the top 6. He is consistently elite in return games. Djokovic versus Agassi comparison. Yeah, Andre, way more aggressive, way more offensive, way less reach. So if you hit a good serve, and we saw this against like Pete Sampras, Andre didn't neutralize Pete's serve. He didn't. Novak would have a better chance to do so. He's longer, rangier, more agile and athletic as far as how he explodes out of his split step. So Djokovic is a better defensive returner, but Agassi, the ball maybe got on you a little bit quicker with Andre. He took the ball a little bit earlier, although Novak still takes it early, and probably just was a bit more spectacular in the way he would return. I want to go back to the YouTube comments. Here's a good one, though. This is from Lima Limon. Analysts/fans calling Sinner's tennis boring, plus the charge that he lacks charisma. Not fun for a Sinner fan. Do you recall other players being labeled as boring? Example, was Fed's dominance before Nadal/Nole also labeled boring? Or was his game so beautiful that he was exempt? Nadal dominated on clay for years. Don't recall his matches being called boring, even when they were routine. Would love to hear your thoughts on the boring label, especially from commentators who are assumed to have a nuanced perspective and whose job it is to get others invested in a match. What commentator has called him boring? I haven't heard that from a commentator. That's for sure. That would be surprising to me. Look, so first of all, you guys know this. I am categorically against telling tennis fans what they should enjoy and what they shouldn't enjoy. So I am not going to like offer a defense of Sinner's entertainment value and tell you that you should enjoy him. I'm never going to do that for any players. I will say personally, I have a high level of appreciation for his tennis. And by the way, I have a high level of appreciation for, look, I know he's not like a huge personality, but I think he comes across as like a super kind of, like he's a jovial character. Really, really, first of all, classy and nice. And I think he kind of is giggly and fun and just has a really kind of light way about him. So even if I go like off the court, I appreciate Jannik as a personality in that respect also. But look, it's not some kind of crazy anti-Sinner bias that some people don't like watching him play. Djokovic, and you're saying like, did Nadal get this? Did Federer get this? No, Nadal and Federer didn't, but Djokovic did. Now, Djokovic got the boring label from some people. And look, when a player is more programmed and steady and doesn't have a ton of flair, then that's kind of what happens. Like, some fans are going to call them boring. It's okay. Like, I think it's rooted in what the tennis looks like, but I also think that if you appreciate the things he's doing, it's very easy to absolutely love watching Jannik Sinner play tennis. Like, hey, like if I were to give you like, I don't know, top 10 players who I would want to watch right now, courtside, Jannik Sinner would be high on that list for me, but that's me. And if he's not on somebody else's list because they want other things in as far as like appreciating a tennis player, I think that's fine. I don't think we should lose sleep over that or cry foul over that. Boy, my voice is going. I commentated this morning also, so it's been quite the day. Okay, this is a good one. Okay, two more actually from Twitter, and then I'm going to go back to YouTube. From Thasneem, cyber hate is becoming a menace. If I, as a fan, is feeling the frustration, imagine the mental health of the players. Take Novak Djokovic's situation this year, fueled by Tony J, then the media narrative on the fake injury. Does not sports media have more ethical boundaries, accountability? Cyber hate is a menace and a massive problem in society at large. I like to keep the bigger picture and the context outside of tennis and understand that, like, this is a problem in our schools. This is a problem in politics. Like, it's wide ranging. I'm also going to challenge you again, though, and this is something I said it, in a couple of comments ago. What sports media member has peddled the fake injury narrative? Who in the media, trusted or, I don't know, established or platformed, who has done that? Look, Ben Shelton engaged in some media criticism this Australian Open. And my favorite thing about what Ben said and what Ben did was he was specific. He didn't name names, but he basically did, because he cited specific incidents. And therefore, everything that he said had a full level of credibility, and he was right. It was funny how much love and attention he got for it, because I still think that if you want everybody to universally applaud your opinion, the easiest way to get there is to bash the media. There's no easier way to like get everybody to be like, yes, great point, than to bash the media. But Ben was right also. I don't think anything, I thought Ben was on point. It was just funny to me to see just how much people enjoyed Ben being right about bashing the media. From Gary Wheeler, and there's another question coming up that's going to relate somewhat to that. From Gary, who is the Cal Ripken of the ATP? Who doesn't seem to get injured or plays through whatever is troubling him? That is a great question. And for those who don't know, international audience, Cal Ripken is the baseball player who has the record for most consecutive games played, and the number is ridiculous. Let me look it up real quick. Just insane. This guy, dude, oh my God. This guy played 2,131 consecutive baseball games. Did not get hurt. Did not miss a game. I mean, that is just ridiculous. Who's the tennis equivalent of that? It's a great question. I didn't prepare for this. I don't recall Taylor Fritz picking up an injury in a long time, but it's not Fritz. Can't be de Minaur. It's not Tommy. It's not Rublev. Jack Draper. Just kidding. Khachanov would have been a good candidate until recently. Man, everybody gets hurt. I'm going down this list. Everybody gets hurt. This is hard. I might give up. I might have to give up. Comment what you think. Who's the Cal Ripken? Who's the Iron Man of tennis? Roberto Cabarrus Baena? I don't know. All right. Let's end on that. Let's go back to YouTube. From AJ or Ajay. Hi, Gil. Great coverage of the Aussie, man. Congrats to Jannik again. What a performance. A question regarding the upcoming 2 slams. Out of the French and Wimbledon, of course he is good enough to win them, but which do you think Sinner has a better chance to win? Taking everything into account, his game style, opponent's strengths, etc. His serve would be lethal on grass, and Wimbledon would appear to be the first choice. But I do recall when he first came out onto tour, 2020 French gave Rafa an exciting match. It almost felt clay was his ideal surface for success. And then Alcaraz has won the past 2 Wimbledons, which I hadn't envisioned prior to that, which makes this a very suspenseful summer in my mind. Yeah, good question. I'm going to keep my answer simple on this. With Alcaraz beating Jannik the last 3 times in slow conditions, I'm going to say because of that particular head-to-head and the prospects that you look at there, especially when you add into the fact that hasn't really happened, but in theory, it would be easier to rush Alcaraz at Wimbledon. I'm going to say that Sinner's better chance would be Wimbledon. From Julian. Do you have any favorite interviewers at the Australian Open? I personally love Jim Courier's humor in his interviews. Well, the humor is good, but there's a lot more to what he's doing. And I thought Ben Rothenberg actually made a good point in his piece about this when he was talking about the Shelton thing. Humor only works when there's comfort and familiarity. I mean, it could work if there's not, but that's one of the problems that we saw at the Australian Open. It's one of the things that Ben mentioned. It's like these strangers are coming up to me and poking fun or making jokes. And it's like, dude, I don't know you. Why are you joking around with me? And I totally sympathize to that. For me, it's like, let's stop trying to be funny here and let's be curious about tennis. Let's be curious about tennis. Ask about a moment in the match that was particularly important or interesting. Ask a specific pointed question about that. One thing that Jim does a great job of is he asks big picture questions about what is happening in these guys' careers in the larger picture. For example, after the Djokovic-Zverev semifinal, well, there's not much to discuss when it comes to the match, right? No. So what did Jim ask about? He said, Sasha, you lowered your toss. Tell me about the process. Why did you do that? How long did it take you to, or how about this? Why did you lower your toss? Take us through that. Like, that's a great question. That's somebody who is curious about tennis. And I don't know. Look, I respect all of these interviewers at the Australian Open. A lot of coaches who have had great careers in coaching, a lot of players who have had great careers in playing. But for some reason, the question asking skills, not always there. And, you know, I try to put my money where my mouth is. It's not easy. Asking good questions is not easy. I do it at the US Open every year for US Open Radio. And that's when I'm, again, players right after the matches, I'm asking them questions right away. You know, it's a challenge, but I feel like what would I tell somebody who asks me, like, what is your advice to do that job well? I would say find curiosity in the tennis and use that to ask a question instead of, like, I'm going to be funny and say, like, hey, Ben, like, Gael could be your father. Like, Monfils could be your father. It's like, good joke, man. Like, I like Roger Rashid. Like, I like his commentary a lot, but, like, that's not it. You know, Ben is right. That ain't it. Yeah, Jim's the man at it. Jim's really good. Andrea Petkovic, she's awesome too. I've just got time for maybe a couple more. The player. Hey, Gil, amazing coverage of the AO. My question for you is the following. How different do you think Zverev's career would have looked had he won the final against Thiem? This feels very hard to answer, but I think it would have helped him a lot. That's my gut. I think if he got that monkey off of his back, I think it would have helped him a lot. That's all I can say. From Les. Can Sinner's body handle the movement and power his play style demands long term? I don't think he's had a single slam in the last 2 years without a physical wobble. Every player gets them, but his seem frequent and intense. Look, Jannik's got to keep building up his body. I don't think he's a finished product physically. It's another good question to ask Jannik Sinner. Be curious about the tennis. That'd be a great question right now. Like, Jannik, how much, like, are you still in the process of building up your body? How far do you think you have to go? At what age do you think you'll be, you know, how many years do you think it will be until you're a finished product physically? What's the question here? Can his body handle the play style? Look, there's nothing about his play style that make his physicality untenable or particularly daunting. Andy Murray had a more physical play style than Jannik Sinner, had a great career. Nadal had a more physical play style, had a great career. I think Djokovic, by a little bit, as a young player at least, had a more physical play style. So it's not as if Sinner is, I don't know what an example would be. Yeah, it's not about play style here. It's about building up your body so that it can withstand what Jannik is going to put it through. From anonymous tennis follower. Hi, Gil. One of the biggest takeaways from this AO is that the lost gen narrative became much, much stronger. The top players of the 90s generation, who languished in the shadow of the big three for a long time, are now getting usurped by Sinner and Alcaraz and even losing to the new next gen. Why has the 90s generation failed to produce anyone who could break the dominance of the big three, and now Sinner and Alcaraz? I know that you can analyze the flaws of the individual players, but I'm talking about the generation as a whole, because why is it that everybody from the 90s generation collectively lacked something in their game that would allow them to reach the level of the big three or Sinner/Alcaraz? Is this just a coincidence, or is there a more systematic reason, such as, for example, the 90s gen having scar tissue from being dominated by the big three for so long? I think it's mostly individual case-by-case basis. That's the truth. It's not the most fun answer to this question, but I think that's the right answer to this question. That said, I do think that part of the dynamic is that this generation thought that they were good enough. I truly believe that. I think that in 2019, they thought they were good enough, that's poisonous. It's poisonous to think you're good enough, in a way. It turns out that they weren't good enough. They had to, at the very least, keep getting better. The reason they thought they were good enough is because they were looking at an aging big three, and they thought that when these guys retired, which, by the way, they thought was going to happen probably a little bit quicker than it ended up happening, particularly the case of, Rafa, when you look at what he did in 2022, and Djokovic, what he did in 2023. They thought that when it was exit stage left for those guys, that it was just going to be time for them. It was going to be their time. I think that was their belief system. We're good. We got next. It's all gravy. And when that didn't happen, I thought, first of all, it was a little bit shocking and frustrating for some of them. But also, I just don't think it was a healthy way of thinking about how to kind of, manage development at that stage in their career, because many of them did stagnate for too long. All right, last one. From Praya. Hi, Gil. Now that Medvedev's decline has been going on for a long time and it is highly doubtful that he will win a Grand Slam title again, did Safin have a better career than Medvedev? Who had the highest peak level? All right, I wouldn't be so quick with the premise here that it's highly doubtful. I don't know that I'd put it at highly doubtful. And this is coming from a guy who obviously didn't give him a optimistic preseason prediction. But, look, it could still go the other way. And I don't know. Highly doubtful just feels a little bit strong to me. Anyway, your question. Who had a better career? Safin, Medvedev? Daniil. I think it's Daniil. It's actually kind of similar. We were talking earlier about efficiency in major finals and how important that is. Well, Medvedev has been in 6 major finals and he only converted 1 into a title. Safin, 4 slam finals. He won half of them. He won 2 out of the 4. So Safin ends up with 1 additional major compared to Medvedev. I think that's where Safin's advantages kind of end over Daniil. In terms of being number 1, it's basically a wash. Daniil spent 13 weeks at number 1. Safin spent 9 weeks at number 1. But then if you look at top 10 seasons, huge difference here. Medvedev 6, Safin 3. That's a really big difference. And the fact that Marat only had 3 top 10 seasons, that's where, the injuries, the inconsistencies, the fact that he didn't have a very long career, that's where that stuff kind of dings him. And then if you look at big titles, Daniil has the edge in that, 7-5. So it's actually close right now. But I would say the answer is mainly that Medvedev is a consistent presence, where Safin may have had higher peaks for short periods of time, but it was just kind of this shorter stint of, extreme highs and lows. That's what Marat Safin's career kind of was, more so than Medvedev, who was just kind of established himself in the bedrock of the elite upper echelons of the game in a way that Safin didn't. So if you're really asking me, whose career am I taking? Daniil is my answer to that. But it is a good question. All right, folks. I have a surprise for you. You guys are going to like Monday Match Analysis next week. Monday Match Analysis, kinda. That's your hint. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.